Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are going to get started here in just about a minute or so. We're letting people join and get situated. Good afternoon. I know to some of you, probably maybe midday or maybe even morning for others. So kind of good morning, good afternoon, I think for the majority. Really excited to have you here to have our conversation with Gillian. I'll give her a formal and proper introduction here in just a moment. This is being recorded. So for those who are watching this on the recorded version, hello to you too. Thanks for taking time to watch us on the recorded version. And for those, again, who joined, as long as you've registered and you've joined, you're going to receive a copy of this recording as well, along with a few resources. So I will share towards the end of our discussion today, I'll share a few resources in the chat that Gillian was really kind to share and provide. So I will share all that. I also will share everything, a copy of the recording and those resources in a follow-up email in the next few days. Our really talented marketing and communications team will take the conversation today, kind of pare it down, edit it down so it's really nice and tight for everyone, and we'll make sure that we get that out to you. Please feel free throughout to ask any questions that you may have. So you either can throw that into the chat or into the Q&A. We might not get to it the very moment that you type it in, but I promise you we will come back to that question. So just if we're in the middle of some discussion, I'll be managing the chat. I promise you will not be ignored. So please feel free to throw items into the chat. We'd love to have this kind of be a discussion. So would really love some participation there. With that being said, again, our time's going to be about, say, 20 to 25 minutes together. And I'm going to go ahead and get this rolling. I'll share my screen here and there to kind of show you some of the questions, but then I will stop sharing my screen just so we can have kind of more of a discussion feel. But I am really, really excited and feel really privileged that Gillian Diebold is with us. She is a policy analyst at the Center for Data Innovation, focusing on data policy and digital inequalities. The center studies the intersection of data, technology, and public policy, and Gillian leads her team's work on education technology, along with studying data inequalities, open data, and the impact of artificial intelligence on society. So again, we are really, really, really lucky to have her with us. We know her time is precious and she's really, really talented. So I was really excited when I reached out to her and she said yes. I was actually kind of surprised. I didn't expect that. I was bracing for a no, but I feel very, very lucky that Gillian is with us. With that being said, I'm going to share my screen and we are going to begin with our first question here. So Gillian, in your experience, what are you seeing in the world of ChatGPT, generative AI, and how it is influencing the world of education and data for social good?
First of all, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you all today about generative AI. And I think it's a great question. And it's sort of the hot topic right now. I think every other day we're seeing news about ChatGPT, either, positive and negative, things about that. So I think it's really important that we're having this conversation to kind of take a look at, both the promises and pitfalls of generative AI. So first, I think it's really important actually that we define these terms. So I'm going to take a little bit of a step back from the question, just so we're all kind of operating on the same page. So generative AI, I actually decided to ask ChatGPT itself to define generative AI. And what it came up with is that generative AI is a branch of artificial intelligence that focuses on the creation of new, unique data by training a model on a data set. And it uses a variety of techniques, such as deep learning and neural networks, to generate new data that is similar to the structure to the original data set. That's fine. That's a technical answer. Really, I think for purposes of anyone watching this, generative AI means, AI models built on massive data sets, and they're generating unique images, sounds, videos, and text. And so ChatGPT is obviously a large language model, specifically text-based. And so I'm referring to generative AI just in the context of content creation. So, again, sort of producing that new stuff. Although I think these tools can also be used in accessibility tech, with things like generating audio descriptions or enhancing user interfaces, things like that. So I think the most common use though is for content creation. Another key concept, just to kind of highlight here, would be artificial intelligence in education as a whole, and that's just referencing ed tech tools that use AI enabled technology, whether that be to automate emails from teachers, or use enrollment algorithms, or students using personalized learning platforms. And then the last big concept here, I think that was on the title slide for this, would be data for social good. And that really just means the use of data-driven innovation to solve some of, the most pressing social challenges out there. And as it applies here, data can be used to drive and improve the educational experience and help students and families, make better informed decisions about their educational journeys, and help teachers and administrators direct and run the classroom, and really just enhance student learning. So now to kind of, those are just to set the stage, but to go back to the question of like what we're really seeing in this world of generative AI, I think in a nutshell, it's really that we're seeing students are really fast on the uptake of these tools, and teachers, administrators, parents a little less so. They're kind of the contingent, where we're seeing a lot of hostility and fears. But I think that students are really, really keen to use these tools, as with, a lot of education technology in general. I think kids are using it for homework, obviously to generate answers. We've definitely seen that, answering your basic take home assignments with it. But I also think, a more positive spin would be, I have seen cases where some teachers are sort of encouraging students to use it. And then, they'll say, okay, answer this prompt with the text, but then you have to edit it, or you have to get the prompt to sort of properly convey X, Y, and Z idea. So I think that that's really interesting. There's some really interesting use cases, and we can maybe get into that a little more if you'd like. I also have seen, teachers are using it to generate lesson plans, so kind of to reduce that burden outside the classroom. And then another thing we're seeing is just a lot of hype. The hype cycle is here with ChatGPT and generative AI as a whole. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions being spread. There's a lot of, inaccuracies, both being made by the chatbots themselves and by, media outlets reporting on it, or just anyone in their day-to-day conversation. So I think it's an important time for ed tech. It's kind of front and center of it used to maybe just be school administrators were having these conversations, and now kind of society as a whole is having it every other day. Not just in the tech policy world. I think people are reading and talking about ChatGPT and, oh my God, did you see what it said yesterday? And all that stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff here, but it's definitely, I think it's kind of at its peak of both, excitement and fears right now.
Yeah, and I'd love to take another step back too, Gillian, with what kind of with the introduction and kind of what you're talking about here. But I'd love to hear a little bit too, and for everybody else to hear, maybe what spurred you on or inspired you to kind of get into the work that you're doing, this really, really great work that you're doing at the Center for Data Innovation. What moved you to kind of do that? And then building on that, I mean, is it true? I mean, have you just seen, is it just pretty much ChatGPT, generative AI? Is that just kind of taking over kind of the work that you all are doing?
A little bit, but so yeah, to take that step back, I kind of got into the ed tech space first, just sort of through the digital inequalities realm. So a lot of the work and what I studied and have done research on in the past is just about, what the importance of representation in data, kind of at that meta level, and sort of what that means for society and what it means to be in a data set and not, and then therefore, if a tool will work effectively for you or not, and things like that. So that's always kind of been a research interest of mine, and I'm I studied media and communications policy, so that's kind of a little bit of my background and how I kind of got into this. And then, one of the first things I did when I took this role actually was working on a piece that I think we'll share later about artificial intelligence and education, kind of in general, doing a big high-level overview of its applications. So that kind of introduced me to saying, oh wow, there's all these tools, and it's there's a lot of interest, but then what are these? I'm kind of interested also in the barriers. A lot of the work we do at the center is looking around things like, privacy and security, as it relates to these kinds of innovations. So I kind of had this roundabout way of getting into the ed tech space, but that's sort of my background there. And then what was your second question? I'm sorry.
Just kind of so like you said, I feel like it's every day, if not on multiple,
Oh.
I feel like I'm on all the social media sites too, but it's like, yeah, you're seeing something, some social media post about ChatGPT or some news report about ChatGPT, interviews with educators, interviews with students. It seems like, again, from my outside perspective a little bit, is that's all you're hearing about. But I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
that what you're seeing too, kind of with the work that you're doing, is it really kind of taking over the discussion and people wanting to learn more about this?
Yeah, I think it definitely is taking over the discussion. When I wrote that report just on AI in general, ChatGPT didn't exist. I mean, ChatGPT didn't exist until I think November of last year. So, I think things are moving at a really fast pace. And sort of once people picked up on, oh, this is something completely new, that, we haven't really seen in the last decade with, all the other ed tech tools that exist, people kind of latched on to that. So it definitely is kind of taking over. And then, any discussions again about privacy or ethics or just responsible use in general, it's all coming back to ChatGPT now. So it's definitely the hot topic in tech policy.
Yeah. Great. We're going to move on to our next question for everyone is, Gillian, what suggestions and tips do you have for educators? And I'm going to throw in companies as well, just educators and companies as we all venture into this new world of generative AI. So just suggestions and tips, kind of maybe like, how do we start going down that path? If it's something maybe that educators are interested in, or we're interested in as a company or an organization, are you seeing places to start? Is there kind of a beginner's guide to some of this?
So there's no beginner's guide, unfortunately, but I think we can kind of take lessons from just other tech, adoption use cases, really. So I think the main thing is just think of generative AI as a tool. It's not really something that you should be overhyping. It's also not something to underestimate, because I think it's really important to not fight it, but really focus on kind of responsible implementation. And this applies to really all ed tech tools in general, but I think, AI specifically, maybe due to the name, maybe due to, whatever, I think it comes with a lot of fears. People kind of are pretty resistant to it because, oh, is it going to replace teachers? Is it going to replace, X, Y, and Z? Is it going to be very unfair to my student? And I think those are all valid concerns. I'm not here to say they're not, but I also think that it's really presenting a new opportunity here. So my main suggestion is just don't underestimate it. And rather, I think that people's gut reactions that we've seen across the country has kind of been to ban it outright. I think schools, I think it's New York City, not New York State, that has banned ChatGPT in the classroom. And I don't think that is the correct route. I think that, it is going to take, there is some work to be done outside the classroom on how to effectively use it and how to make sure teachers are equipped for, classrooms that are using it with or without their knowledge. But I don't think that banning it is the correct step because I do think it's the future. A lot of the work I do talks about the so-called AI economy. And it is true, as we move into the future, most jobs will have some or all portions automated. And that's not saying that, people are going to be taken out of work as a result of AI. That's not at all the case. But it is the case that, workers of the future are going to have to know how to use AI. I'm not saying program it. I'm saying sort of interact with it and use it as a tool to sort of augment their work. And so I think it's important, schools are sort of creating those fundamental building blocks. So I think that students should really be able to, learn to use these tools and use them effectively and responsibly. So I think step one, don't ban, but it is, it's something to think about. Another thing that I think is very important is just sort of transparency from the get-go. I think that, past ed tech ventures have kind of seen, a lot of panic. And that kind of ended up with some detrimental effects. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but about a decade ago, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation had this big plan to create this sort of like national aggregation of student data. And there was a lot of potential there, to sort of identify different student outcomes and patterns and all that kind of stuff. But basically it failed. And one of the key reasons it failed was sort of this lack of upfront transparency and lack of, training, not training necessarily, but, communication, dialogue with schools, with parents specifically. And so because there wasn't that kind of back and forth dialogue and conversations with the stakeholders, the whole venture sort of collapsed, really. It did, because the fears sort of took over, and, a lot of disparities were kind of laid bare there. And I think that we should really seek to avoid that with this situation, because maybe sort of unlike data sharing in the case I just gave, I don't think generative AI is going to go away that easily. And so I think kind of having continual conversations with school communities just about, getting them to buy in to this technology and see all of its potential is a really important step one. So, I think it was banned outright, let's say, in those schools. First of all, I don't think that should happen, but let's say step one could be, have a parent-teacher association meeting or something saying, we're considering using this technology in the classroom. Here's how we're considering using it. And also here's how your own kids are using it. I think kind of having that open dialogue is a really important thing with this, because again, it'll kind of combat that fear, that gut punch or, gut reaction of saying like, I'm scared of it, I don't know it. So I think that's also an important step one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I see some parallels to. So for anybody's on the call, I was an educator myself for about 13 years. I was a dean of students. The school I was at was a pre-K through 12 school, but I primarily oversaw 5th through 12th grade students. And the reason I'm seeing some parallels in some of the tips that you gave, which I think are spot on, and what we did was really when, frankly, when the iPhone, came out, and then, then it was much more normal to have a phone on campus. And then you saw the boom, right, of social media. So it was one thing to have a device on campus, and then iPads and then Chromebooks or whatever the case may be. But then just social media, and what does that look like in the day-to-day, right? Should middle school students have it? What does that do for brain development? What does that do for, an Apple Watch? Does that mean they can cheat on a test possibly, or whatever the case is? So I remember just having so many discussions, right? We try to loop in the students at least and try to get their perspective. And, there was definitely some tweakings that we had to do to policies, but right along with what you suggested, I mean, we try to get the parents involved, to kind of talk about that, to hear concerns maybe that were there, and to fit out the best structure for our community. I mean, you're right, it was tough, but I do think I'm with you. I think a lot of it is there a way to embrace some of the technology? But listening, I think having that dialogue is really important. And we got a really, I think, a spot on comment in the chat where it said, calculators and spell check were turned off years ago in school devices. With time, educators will learn how to incorporate this into the learning process. And I think that is spot on with that. And then we have a quick divergence here, Gillian. We have one question that somebody can ask was, kind of this world about, generative AI, the latest news tools, all those items. Do you have a recommendation of a few other people beside yourself? So I would recommend go out there and follow Gillian as well. But beside yourself, is there a couple of people that come to mind that maybe the people joining us today or watching back that you would recommend maybe are a good follow on social media, or some other people out there who are kind of doing real-time updates with this stuff?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind, she'll actually be a panelist an event I'm hosting later, or not later this month, but in March. Dr. Tori Trust, I don't remember her off my head, but she on Twitter, she's a professor of education technology at UMass Amherst, and she a lot of the points that I'm saying are actually echoing things that she's also written. So I would definitely recommend following her. Just for kind of a nuanced take of, not necessarily techno-optimist or saying, risk-based, but just she provides really balanced looks at this. And actually, something you were saying that I thought about was that she said this in an article in Wired, I believe, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, is that, kind of banning these tools. Another reason it's not the right way to go is that it will sort of create this culture of distrust in general. It kind of creates that students are going to use it, but they're going to try and sneak around the teachers and all that stuff, and their parents won't know that they're doing it. And then, then the only solution at a certain point is you cornered into a ban. And so again, I just thought that was an interesting point that she made. So I definitely recommend Dr. Tori Trust.
Awesome.
Yeah, another thing, I think I saw a comment pop up in the chat, was just, the concept of the plagiarism panic in general, like you said, calculators, search engines, even spell check. And I think something to think about is that, this sort of cycle happens all the time. And, all those things, some people did a reactionary ban, others allowed it. Ultimately, it leads to sort of new innovations, maybe detecting tools, obviously Turnitin or, Grammarly and whatever can detect plagiarism at a basic level. And now we're seeing with ChatGPT, there's something called, I think it's called GPT-0, to sort of detect the use of generative AI on assignments. So I think we're going to see a whole new wave of tools like that as well. So again, I wouldn't say ban, I'd say, use it as an opportunity to kind of create more meaningful assignments as well. You can ban high-tech calculators, but that's not really going to prepare students for the future. We're not just frankly, it's not that realistic in a lot of cases. Obviously, if you want to have in-classroom tests, totally fine. But on at-home assignments, you have to you have to reshape it. So, one thing I think that educators did in response to that kind of calculator is, go more word problem based and things like that aren't just quite as, plug and chug as basic problems. So I think the same sort of thing is going to apply with ChatGPT. Rather than, a basic response just saying like kind of regurgitating facts, it's going to encourage a lot more critical thinking. And I don't think that that's going to be too hard for teachers to handle either. And they also can use these tools to sort of help create these more meaningful prompts as well.
Yeah. It's, you've touched on, I'm still going to kind of ask this again, if there's anything else that maybe we've missed, but and to be fair, to kind of look at both sides of the coin related to generative AI, and in particular, we've talked about ChatGPT, but really anything in this realm. What are some of the concerns that maybe you've seen, or maybe some things that we do need to be at least flag a little bit? Say, hey, we need to watch that. We do need to be careful with this because it is new. We're learning, kind of we're flying as we're building the plane, as they say. And so, what maybe concerns do you have or that you've seen come up that are related to generative AI? But also, feel free to sprinkle in more positives because I want to be fair to both sides. But I'd be interested to hear there are other concerns that you've seen with this.
Yeah. The central concern is definitely cheating. But I also kind of think that's the easiest one to negate overall. So, and we touched on that. Another big concern is sort of the potential for these tools to lie. We have to if you're going to be teaching or allowing students to use this, that has to be accompanied by, media literacy, AI literacy, whatever you want to call it. Because there is potential, obviously for these tools to spread misinformation or, just sort of say inaccuracies, because the way they're programmed is sort of to be generating original content. So it's not necessarily meant to be at this point in time, not saying it won't in the future, completely indexing a journal of political science and accurately citing it. That's not the point right now of these tools, although some people may think it is. So, and students may think that's how they can use it. So you have to kind of be wary of that. And that kind of leads me into a more positive point, is that I think teaching AI literacy is really important in schools. I think most states now have a digital literacy curriculum, at some level for students in K to 12. And we've seen some states are kind of putting specifically media literacy to combat misinformation. I know New Jersey just did that for all grade levels. But I think another complementary kind of curriculum, or maybe modules within a curriculum, would be AI literacy, kind of teaching students how to, better understand, use, and evaluate AI-driven tools. And that'll kind of help them, just be able to spot, what is an appropriate use for AI in this situation, what's not, and then they can also evaluate the effects of using that tool in a given moment. Kind of to go back though to the positives and negatives, I think another potential negative that I've seen is deep fakes, which is more in the image side of generative AI. And that would be masquerading kind of as another person and sort of placing words in other people's mouths. And I think there, again, if students don't understand how to evaluate or use the tools effectively, or the administrators, that can lead to some serious situations, especially in kind of the cases of cyberbullying and things like that. But yet again, there's kind of flip sides to everything. And, deep fakes, which I think has a specifically negative connotation, they can also, ultimately be used in things like history classes, say, let's have Ben Franklin talk about X, Y, and Z. And I think that creates a whole new wave of, interactivity and something sort of interesting that I don't think any of us ever experienced in the classroom. So there, there's a lot of hard choices here. And I think just kind of understanding and having that information is a key step. And then lastly, I guess, like a kind of rundown of some of the positives that I would say would be, personalized learning in general. I think generative AI helps, students kind of learn at their own pace, but also, it can help teachers adapt content, things that are really specifically interesting to them and motivating to them, while still kind of staying connected with their peers. So, especially in young grades, I think interests kind of vary from week to week or month to month, in a way that, it can be hard to keep engagement in a classroom. And so, with generative AI, it's a lot easier for teachers to kind of develop content that can kind of change very quickly. It's not hard. If I develop a lesson plan with ChatGPT on dinosaurs, it's actually quite easy to take that exact lesson plan and sort of every step to it and just change dinosaurs to plants. Like it's pretty simple to kind of regenerate that sort of thing. So I think, there's a lot of potential there, to kind of make classrooms more dynamic. I also think it's pretty exciting in general for teachers, in terms of that lesson planning or sort of automating, things outside the classroom. That's what teachers want to focus on: in classroom engagement, and outside the classroom, you have to deal with responding to parents and things like that. And as these bots get more and more powerful, I think that we're going to be able to reduce that kind of outside the class administrative work for teachers so they can kind of focus on in class.
That's great. Thank you for that. It was a really beautifully in-depth answer. And kind of here as we're wrapping up, as our time's getting close, I'd love to hear, Gillian, any final thoughts that you have on this topic. Take that wherever you'd like to. I want it to be open-ended on purpose. And then really kind of and then data for social good in general, right? And how linked maybe are, kind of the generative AI and these ChatGPT things that are happening. Do you see that there's a connection there, maybe using that for data for social good? But I know some of the other topics and research that you've done. I want to make sure that you have just kind of a space to discuss like that. And any final thoughts before we ask if there's any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think my main takeaway would be really the importance of AI literacy in schools. Again, obviously computer science curriculums and understanding all of that, that's important. Sorry, that sounded too flip. That's definitely important, but I think that just being able to evaluate these tools and kind of will help create just more informed students, and just a more informed society. So I just really support the development of those kinds of curriculums as well. And I also think, as it connects, this is outside the realm of education, but, generative AI has so many other uses. And I think like one that I'm really interested in and kind of writing about now would be in the humanitarian sector. Generative AI actually is kind of filling a lot of different needs in terms of personnel and in terms of, getting messages out a lot faster. It can also sort of help with, different mapping efforts. There's a lot of interesting use cases out there just beyond these sort of large language models like ChatGPT, with generative AI that I think are going to kind of be coming up in the news cycle more and more in the coming months.
That's great. Well, and we're going to talk about a few of the resources I shared in the chat, but as that's happening, kind of final call. If there's any questions from anybody, please feel free to throw those into the chat and the Q&A, and we'll get to those in just a moment. But I did want to highlight two resources that I put into the chat. One was a recent article that Gillian wrote. That is the first link that's in there. And the second one is, Gillian, correct me if I'm wrong, or please add on to this. You're going to be on a panel, right, coming up in March. And that is the second link that is in here, right, that people can register for. So I'd love for you to talk about maybe both of those and what those are before we kind of wrap up.
Yeah, the first report is, the the second link, the How AI Can Improve K-12 Education, that's that kind of high level overview of different applications that I talked about, applications for students, teachers, and administrators. And it does take this kind of optimistic look at AI in the classroom, just kind of as a warning up front, but it also kind of examines just the different challenges to implementation, how we can kind of make that kind of implementation of these tools in the classroom equitable. Because I think that's something really, really important, that these tools don't only go to the schools with the most resources, but that it kind of affects all schools in the United States. And then the first thing, the event you were speaking about, I'm actually the moderator of that. So I have 4 panelists. You can see who they are on that link. But Tori Trust, who I mentioned, is one of them. Also Tony Wan, who's just kind of a big figure in the ed tech space as well. Jeff Young is the managing editor at EdSurge. And so he's going to have a lot of great insights. And then I have someone from industry who actually created one of these generative AI tools. Prof. Jim Deepak Sekar is the CEO of that company. And that company works with, I think it's lesson planning and that kind of content creation for the classroom. So I think we're going to have a pretty varied set of perspectives there, not from industry to sort of the more analytical side. And I'm pretty excited for that. So, and that's open to the public, so anyone can register there. And again, there's opportunities to submit questions, and it's a little longer than this webinar, so there's more time for questions too.
Fantastic. Well, Gillian, thank you so much. Really, that can't be overstated. I know you're extremely busy, but really appreciate that you shared some of your afternoon and your day with us and your incredible knowledge base. And again, for those who joined us, thank you. For those who are watching this back, I know we had a lot of requests to make sure they were getting a recording of this. I will share those links in my follow-up email to everybody. You can follow Gillian online as well, which is what I do. She's a great follow, so talented. And again, just thank you so much for taking some time out to share everything with us. Thanks to everyone else for coming. Thanks for those who are watching. Have a great rest of the week, a great weekend, and we will all connect again real soon from our team at Innovate EDU and Landing Zone. And again, Gillian, thank you so much. And hope everyone has a really great one, and we will be in touch soon. Bye, everybody.